Maybe tonight you're simply tired. Tired of giving. Tired of showing up. Tired of holding things together while no one sees how much it costs. The kind of tired that lives deeper than the body. The kind that settles behind the ribs and whispers that maybe the little things don't matter anymore. Maybe they never did. But somewhere beneath that weariness, a softer voice still breathes, reminding the soul that God treasures even the smallest act of faithfulness, that His light rests gently on every hidden effort, on every unseen kindness. Take a slow, deep breath. Let the day begin to slide off your shoulders. Let the eyes grow heavy, and the breath grow long. Let the noise of the world step back a little further. This is a time for stillness. A time to be reminded that you are safe within the hands of the one who sees. If these stories bring you peace, take a moment to like this video. Subscribe for more nightly reflections, and share where you're listening from tonight. Your words and presence help keep this space warm and growing. Now, take another slow breath. Let's begin. Evening gathered across the earth like a woolen shawl. Fields sighed in the hush of dusk. The sky lowered its blue into indigo. And in that sacred quiet the story began. A master prepared for a long journey. His heart steady and kind. His eyes full of trust as he called 3 servants to his side. The light in the courtyard caught the dust in the air. Gold and slow. Like blessing made visible. Into their hands he placed what he valued, each according to what he knew they could carry. Silver coins that gleamed with possibility. Not merely wealth, but the tender weight of trust, of shared responsibility, of hope planted in human care. The first servant felt the warmth of those coins like sunlight, remembering past harvests and honest work. Gratitude moving like river water through the heart. The second servant bowed low, already planning how best to serve the gift, already dreaming of ways to let it grow. But the third looked down and saw not opportunity, only risk. The sky darkened inside his thoughts. Fear's whisper grew louder than faith's song. And when the others turned toward the fields, he turned toward the ground. The parable unfolds like the rhythm of our own days. Chances to love, to create, to serve, to believe that what we hold, no matter how small, can still become something beautiful. The night held that truth close, wrapping it in quiet air and the perfume of olive branches. Even in stillness, the Spirit worked like gentle fire beneath the coals of fatigue. A reminder that faithfulness isn't measured in grand gestures, but in the soft, steady, sacred choice to keep tending what we've been given. So tonight, as breath slows, remember that you are not unseen. The smallest good thing you did today, the patience you offered, the kindness you managed when it was hard, is noticed and held in the light of the Master's gaze. Breathe again, slow and easy. Let your thoughts rest like tools laid down after a long day. Let your spirit loosen from its effort. Let grace do the work now. In this peace, every faithful heart finds its home. The morning of the story rose softly, a pale gold light brushing over the fields and rooftops. The master stood at the edge of his land, the air cool, still, fragrant with the scent of dew and grain. He looked once more at the 3 servants who waited before him, their faces lined with expectation and uncertainty, and in his eyes rested a calm confidence, the kind that comes from knowing hearts rather than appearances. He spoke few words, only what was needed, then placed the talents in their hands, silver heavy with meaning, trust shining brighter than the metal itself. He did not linger. He simply turned and began his journey, footsteps fading into the distance like the receding hum of wind after prayer. And when his shadow disappeared beyond the bend of the road, a quiet choice remained in the air. The first servant looked down at the gift and felt a quiet stirring of purpose, the memory of the master's kindness alive in his chest. The world suddenly larger, the work ahead not a burden but an invitation. He set out into the fields with steady breath, beginning to plant, to build, to create. Every motion slow, deliberate, sacred. The second servant walked beside him for a while, their laughter gentle, their plans unfolding like lines of sunlight through mist. Both hearts found joy not in the coin but in the trust behind it. They worked as though the master's presence lingered beside them, watching not with judgment but with pride. But the third servant remained behind, eyes fixed on the ground, fear creeping like a shadow around his ankles. He turned the talent over and over in his hands, its weight pressing against every doubt he had ever known. What if he failed? What if the master returned disappointed? What if the others proved wiser, stronger, more worthy? The thoughts grew louder until all he could hear was his own uncertainty echoing back at him. He walked into a grove beyond the courtyard, the soil dark and loose. And there, beneath a fig tree, he dug a shallow hole, not with hatred, not with rebellion, but with the trembling of a heart that had forgotten how much it was trusted. The coin disappeared beneath the earth, its gleam swallowed by safety. The breeze shifted, carrying the scent of tilled ground and distant work, the sounds of life and effort moving across the valley. And for a moment, he wondered if he had done the right thing. The quiet was kind, but heavy. He sat down and waited, listening to the whisper of leaves that almost seemed to ask, what if faith is meant to move, not hide? The parable's rhythm moved gently beneath these moments, teaching not through haste but through stillness, showing that trust requires motion, that love desires expression, that safety without surrender becomes a small and airless room. Night fell again, Stars gathered like silent witnesses, and in the hush the faithful servants continued their work. Hands rough, hearts open. They were not racing, not striving for glory, only tending what they had been given, watering it with patience, harvesting it with quiet gratitude. The land slept in peace that night, not because all was done, but because the doing was honest. Each act of care becoming a song that rose unseen into the waiting heavens. Let the breath slow again. In through the nose, out through the mouth. Let the body feel its weight in the softness beneath it. Let the shoulders sink a little further. Let the thoughts drift like clouds, each one fading into still blue. The story continued to breathe around them, and within, reminding every soul that faithfulness begins with a single choice: to trust the goodness already placed in their care. The morning light deepened into day, and the field shimmered with quiet motion. The first servant bent to his work with peace in every movement, soil parting easily beneath his hands, each seed a small prayer pressed into the earth. He did not rush. He did not count. He simply tended what he had been given, believing that time and patience would weave their own miracle. Birdsong drifted through the warm air, the rhythm of life steady and kind, each note like an echo of trust. He looked toward the horizon where the second servant worked among olive trees, gathering branches, building pens for sheep, shaping something lasting. Both men felt the master's trust alive in them, not as pressure, but as purpose, and the land itself seemed to hum in approval. Their faithfulness was quiet, unannounced. There were no crowds to see, no rewards to chase, only the joy of being part of something bigger than themselves. The work became worship, the field a sanctuary, the sunlight a benediction that touched their shoulders and whispered, "Keep going." In the stillness beyond the hills, the third servant watched from afar, days passing like slow water, the buried talent resting in its dark cradle, safe, untouched, and yet, the heart uneasy. The soil whispered each night as the moon climbed, "There is more to you than fear. There is more to this gift than safety." He tried not to listen, tried to drown the whisper in routine. But the silence of the buried coin had its own weight, heavier each day. The parable turned softly here, showing that time reveals what fear conceals, that light will always seek what is hidden, and that love cannot be sealed beneath earth forever. For the divine breath moves through all things, calling even the timid soul back into motion. One afternoon, as shadows stretched long, the first servant paused to rest by a stream. He watched water move over stone, unhurried, constant, never hoarding its flow. And he smiled, realizing that faithfulness feels like that, the steady giving of what passes through your hands. knowing it will reach where it is needed, even if unseen. He cupped water in his palms, clear and cold, and whispered a prayer without words. A prayer that sounded like thank you and helped me remain steady. The air carried it away into the valley where olive trees swayed, leaves shimmering like living silver. A reminder that every act of faith grows beyond the place it began. By the time dusk returned, his labor had multiplied, not only in what could be counted, but in peace, in joy, in quiet assurance that the Master's trust was honored, and that his work, however small, had become something beautiful in the eyes of God. The second servant's efforts also bore fruit. The pens strong, the trees flourishing, the people around them nourished by their diligence, laughter rising with the scent of bread baking nearby. All of it simple, sacred, born from the decision to believe that small things matter. And still, somewhere beyond the fields, the buried talent slept, the stars above it bright as questions unspoken. Take a deep breath now, in through the nose. Hold for a moment, then release slowly. Let the mind drift with the rhythm of this story. Calm, steady, unhurried. Let the breath find its own soft pattern, like ripples upon a lake. Let rest become a quiet prayer, not for more, but for meaning in what already is. The parable whispered on the wind that night, reminding every listening heart that the smallest faith, when tended with love, is enough to move the seasons. The sun had begun its slow descent, turning the edges of the world to amber and rose. A hush spread over the land like a blessing finding its place. In that hour between labor and rest, the first servant stood still, breathing in the scent of earth and wheat, and knew that his work was becoming something larger than him. Not just gain, but grace. The quiet satisfaction of having cared well for what was given. His hands were lined with dust, but they felt like prayer. His heart steady as a psalm half remembered from childhood. He did not measure his success in coins or harvests, but in peace, in the way the field seemed to hum with gratitude, in the knowledge that the Master's trust had found a safe home in his effort. The second servant walked among olive trees whose branches bowed heavy with fruit, the sound of doves settling for the night above him. He paused beneath their shade, and lifted his eyes toward the deepening sky. It looked endless, tender, almost listening, and he thought of how the Master had believed in him, how that belief had changed everything. Fear had become purpose, doubt had become prayer, and work had become worship. He smiled quietly, realizing that faithfulness is not about how much is held, but how much is offered. The way oil pours from the press, giving itself away so that light might burn in the darkness, and far beyond the fields, in the hush between fig trees. The third servant stirred from uneasy sleep, his thoughts restless as leaves in a dry wind. The buried talent called to him in dreams, its voice like a faint pulse beneath the soil. He could almost hear it say, "You were meant for more than waiting." He rose before dawn and went to the place where he had hidden the coin, the ground cool beneath his fingers. He brushed away a thin layer of dust and stared at the glint of metal half buried. The sight made his chest ache. It was safe. Yes. But lifeless. Untouched by growth. He sat there a long while, listening to the faint sounds of morning. A rooster far away. A child laughing. The lowing of oxen beginning the day's pull. Life continuing. Everything moving except what he had chosen to keep still. And he felt something soften inside him. A memory of the Master's eyes. Not stern, but kind. Trusting. Believing. The ache became a prayer, though he didn't know the words. The wind moved through the fig branches, carrying the scent of ripening fruit, and it felt like forgiveness. He didn't dig yet. Not tonight. But he looked at the mound of earth as though it might one day bloom. The story held all three in its quiet arms. One working, one rejoicing, one learning to listen again. And above them the sky stretched wide with patience. The same sky that had seen the beginning of every promise God ever made. A reminder that grace does not hurry. It waits. It nurtures. It meets the fearful where they are. The fields dimmed into twilight. Stars blinked awake. And the first servant lit a small lamp, its glow pooling on the ground like melted gold. He whispered gratitude, not for reward, but for the peace of having done what was his to do. The lamp flickered gently in answer, as if heaven breathed approval. Take another breath, deep and easy. Let it fill the chest with warmth. Exhale slowly, releasing every tight thought. Let the shoulders soften, the brow ease. Let the heart rest in the rhythm of this night. Faithfulness, even in the smallest things, is never unseen. It becomes light that guides others home. It becomes fragrance in the air after rain. It becomes the music that turns labor into love. The morning rose again with quiet gentleness. Thin ribbons of light threading through the branches of the olive trees. Dew resting on every leaf like a whispered blessing. The first servant stepped into the field before the sun had fully broken. His breath visible in the cool air. His hands already reaching for the work that awaited. Each motion slow, peaceful, deliberate. He no longer thought of profit, nor of the weight of the silver. The task itself had become a prayer. Each furrow a verse. Each movement a form of worship. He had learned that tending what was given was its own reward. That peace does not come at the end of labor, but during it, in the rhythm of steady care, in the quiet trust that God watches even the smallest diligence. The second servant's steps echoed nearby, both men working side by side in easy silence, the kind of silence filled with unspoken understanding. When one paused to rest, the other smiled, and the day moved forward like a slow hymn, carried on wind and effort. Sometimes, when the work became heavy, they would stop and watch how light touched the world, how the same sun fell on both the fruitful field and the barren one, on those who labored and those who feared. It reminded them that grace is not a wage, but a gift, a presence that abides even when hands grow tired. Far away, the third servant still visited the place of buried trust. Each morning he would brush the dust from that mound, sometimes kneeling beside it, speaking softly into the silence. I still have it. It's safe. It's waiting. Yet even as he said the words, something in his tone began to shift. Safety was starting to sound like sorrow. The buried coin was no longer a comfort. It had become a mirror, showing him the stillness in his own heart. One afternoon, as light poured gold through the trees, he saw children chasing each other through the fields, laughter breaking like water, effortless, alive. They stumbled across his hidden place and paused, looking curiously at the disturbed soil. He waved them on gently, smiling so they would not dig. But when their laughter faded into the distance, he sat beside that small mound again and whispered, "Why am I still afraid?" The question lingered long after the breeze carried it away, and perhaps heaven heard it, for peace began to settle around him, not in answer, but as invitation. The parable moved softly through these moments, like a shepherd walking among sleeping sheep, reminding that faithfulness is not perfection, but motion, the willingness to begin again, even when weary, even when unsure, even when yesterday's courage feels faint. The first servant looked up as the sky shifted toward dusk. He watched the color deepen, and felt that same shift within. A calm settling, a knowing that the day had been enough. Not perfect, not without flaw, but enough. Because it had been honest, it had been offered. He whispered into the dimming air, "Thank you for trusting me with this, for letting me take part in your goodness." And though no voice answered, a breeze touched his cheek, cool and tender, and he knew it was heard. Let your own breath follow that rhythm now, in through the nose, slow and deep, out through the mouth, gentle and complete. Feel the body loosen, the heart lighten. Feel the spirit's nearness, as sure as evening light upon water. Faithfulness in small things opens the door to great peace. It is the song the world keeps singing, even when we forget the tune. The evening drifted in again, slow and golden. The kind of light that softens everything it touches. Long shadows stretching across the earth like open hands. The first servant paused beside the rose he had sown, breathing in the quiet scent of the land. The hum of crickets beginning to rise. A song of gratitude built from small and faithful things. He looked at what the day had become. The simple beauty of honest work. And he felt no need to count or measure. The peace in his chest was its own reward. He thought of the master and smiled. Not because of what might be earned, but because he had been trusted. Chosen to care for something that mattered. Chosen to let small seeds tell the story of God's abundance. The second servant lit a lantern at the edge of the grove. Its flame a single star mirrored on earth. The olive branches swayed gently above him, whispering secrets of patience and time. He remembered the first day the master had handed him the talents. The warmth of that gaze. The weight of that trust. How uncertain he had felt. And how that uncertainty had slowly become love. He ran a hand across the bark of one of the trees. Its trunk rough beneath his fingers. Its roots deep and unseen. And he realized that faithfulness is like this tree. It grows where it is planted. Not chasing the sun, but trusting the soil. Drinking slow blessings through unseen roots. Growing strong in silence. In the quiet distance, the third servant sat alone beside the mound of buried silver. Twilight wrapped around him like a heavy cloak. He could still hear the laughter of the others faintly carried on the wind. And it stirred something inside him. Not envy, but longing. A desire to feel that same peace. That same warmth of purpose. He leaned back against the fig tree, eyes half closed, and thought about the master's face, about the way his voice had sounded. Not demanding, not harsh, only full of calm assurance. It had not been a command. It had been a gift. And yet, he had met that gift with fear. A sigh escaped him, soft and breaking. He whispered into the gathering dark. I was afraid. The words came like confession, like rain on parched soil. And though no answer came, something inside him loosened. The fear no longer pressing as tightly against his ribs. Night deepened, and above the fields the stars glimmered, countless and steady, their light reminding every living thing that faith does not vanish in darkness. It glows, quietly, persistently, until the dawn returns. The first and second servants finished their tasks and rested beneath the same sky, sharing bread, laughter, a few words about the day. Nothing grand, just the contentment of those who know they've done what was theirs to do. They watched the stars together, their silence a prayer that rose like incense through the cool air. Faithfulness is often quiet, unnoticed, but heaven hears it. Heaven counts it. Heaven gathers each small effort like pearls on a string of grace. Take another slow breath. Feel the cool air of night settle around you. Let your heart ease. Your hands grow still. Let the story breathe through you like the wind through olive branches. Let peace begin to fill the places where fear once lived. God is not looking for perfection, only presence. The willingness to care, to trust, to keep trying, to let His light reach through your small faith and make it shine. The days began to fold into one another, soft and unhurried, a rhythm of sunrise and rest, of hands that worked and hearts that trusted. The first servant's field grew rich with promise. Green rose bending in the breeze like a quiet choir, each blade of grain singing a note of gratitude to the unseen sky. He had stopped thinking about increase, about what the master might say. His mind had become like the soil, open, patient, willing to receive whatever came. In the grove nearby, the second servant tended the olive trees with the same gentleness. His days had taken on the stillness of prayer. He rose with the dawn, watered the roots, mended the walls, gathered fruit, and rested at twilight beneath the low branches. Sometimes he would close his eyes and imagine the master walking those same paths, smiling at the steady care given in his absence. Faithfulness had become its own language between them. No words were needed. The rustle of leaves, the hum of bees, the slow pulse of wind through the valley, all spoke the same quiet truth. That devotion often lives unseen, but never unheard by heaven. Beyond the fields, the third servant still sat by his hidden place. The days long, the nights longer, each sunrise whispering to him, "It is not too late." Yet he remained, not because he no longer cared, but because fear had become a companion, familiar, predictable, safer than hope. Sometimes he thought of digging the coin out, then told himself, "Tomorrow, maybe tomorrow." But tomorrow always arrived wearing the same face as yesterday, the face of hesitation. The story of the talents rested in this long waiting, a holy tension between movement and stillness, between trust and fear, a space wide enough for grace to work unseen. One evening, as dusk painted the sky with violet and gold, the third servant watched the first two walk home from their fields, their silhouettes soft against the fading light. They looked peaceful, unburdened, as if the day itself had blessed them. He envied not their success, but their serenity, the ease of souls unafraid to try. He turned his gaze toward the mound, the place where the talent slept. The soil looked different tonight, lighter, as if the earth itself was waiting for him. He reached out, brushed away a few grains, saw the faint glint of silver. It caught the last light of the setting sun and flashed like a heartbeat. He pulled his hand back quickly, startled by how alive it seemed. The wind stirred through the fig leaves above him, their whispering almost a voice. Do not bury what was meant to shine. He closed his eyes, a tear slipping free without warning. The parable wrapped around this moment like a lullaby, reminding that even hesitation can become holy, that God waits longer than fear lasts, that every buried hope can rise again when the time is gentle enough. The first servant watched stars bloom across the sky. He whispered thanks for the master's trust, and for the peace that had grown from it. His prayer drifted into the night like soft smoke, reaching even to the grove where the fearful one sat, unseen but not untouched. Take a slow breath now. Let the air move in quietly, like the tide returning to shore. Exhale, long and low, letting go of every held worry. Let the body sink deeper into stillness. Let grace keep you company here in the silence. Faith waits with patience. Faith grows in hidden soil. Faith remembers that even the smallest courage is enough to begin again. The day of return began like any other. Light spilling softly across the horizon. Birds calling from the edges of the fields. The scent of ripened grain rising through the air. Nothing announced what was coming. No trumpet. No warning. Only the calm certainty of time fulfilling its promise. The master came quietly along the road, his cloak dusted with the color of the journey, his eyes warm, seeing everything. The land he had left now blooming beneath the morning sun. He paused at the edge of the field, listening. The sound of work and life filling the valley. His heart lifted, not for what had been gained, but for what had been tended. The first servant saw him first, at a distance, walking in that familiar way, the rhythm of his steps steady and kind, his breath caught, joy rising like dawn within him. He left his tools in the earth and ran down the path. The second servant followed soon after, both hearts open, both eager to offer what they had done. When they reached the master, there were no rehearsed words, no boasts or defenses, only gratitude. They showed him what had grown, how the fields now sang with abundance, how the trees bore fruit heavier than before. Their voices trembled, not from pride, but from awe, for the work had changed them too. The master smiled, lines of joy deepening around his eyes. He placed his hands upon their shoulders and said softly, "Well done. You have been faithful over little. Now enter into the joy of your Lord." And though the words were few, they filled the air with light, as if heaven itself had paused to listen. The moment was not about wealth or harvest, but about love returned, trust honored, and grace revealed in motion. The servants felt peace flood their hearts, not because they had succeeded, but because they had been seen. fully, completely, seen by the one who had trusted them from the beginning. In the distance, the third servant watched, the scene glowing like sunrise against the slope of the hill. The laughter carried easily on the wind. His breath trembled, both from longing and fear. He had imagined this day for so long, and now that it had come, he felt the weight of the hidden coin pressing against his soul. He turned toward the grove, every step heavier than the one before, his hands shaking as he began to dig, the soil cold beneath his fingers. It gave way easily, as though it had been waiting. The metal surfaced again, duller now, but real. He held it up to the fading light, and the sight of it made his heart ache. All that time, all that fear, and here it was, unchanged, unspent, unshed. He closed his hand around it tightly, as if he could squeeze the regret from the years. His lips formed a prayer that was half whisper, half sigh. Lord, help me still. The master's laughter echoed faintly through the valley, not loud, but full of warmth, the kind of sound that carries hope across great distances. And for the first time, the third servant felt tears of release. Not shame, just release. For even now, even after waiting too long, the story was not over. Grace was still walking the same road. The evening breeze rose, brushing through the olive branches, each leaf catching light like a promise renewed. And heaven seemed to murmur, "It's never too late to begin again." Take a slow, deep breath. Let it fill the chest with warmth. Exhale softly. Let go of all that has been buried too long. Let your heart rest in the kindness of this moment. Let hope become the air you breathe. For the Master is always nearer than we think, and his return is not to condemn, but to gather, to restore, to rejoice in what has grown within us. The sun lingered low, stretching the shadows long and golden, as if time itself wished to witness what was about to unfold. The Master stood among the servants, his cloak stirring gently in the quiet wind, the air full of the scent of ripe grain and crushed olive, and peace rested upon the land like a soft hand. The first servant stepped forward, the light catching the silver in his eyes. He placed before the Master the talents he had been given, and the ones that had grown from them. His voice calm, humble, every word carrying the weight of gratitude. "Master, you trusted me with a little, and now there is more. Not because of me, but because of the gift you first gave." The Master's face shone with approval, a joy too deep for words. He reached out and lifted the servant's chin gently. "Well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful over little. I will set you over much. Enter into my joy." The words fell like light rain, soaking into every weary corner of the heart. The servant bowed his head, peace flooding through him like morning across the hills. Then the second servant came forward, the smell of olive oil clinging to his hands, the fruit of his trees glistening in baskets at his feet, his eyes bright but wet with emotion. "Master, the gift you gave has grown. The trees bear fruit beyond what I imagined, and the oil burns brighter than before. Thank you for trusting me with even this." Again the master's smile deepened. The same blessing whispered once more. "Well done, good and faithful servant. Enter into my joy." And though the words were the same, each servant felt them as though spoken only to them. Because love has no limit, and joy repeats itself without growing thin. The air shimmered with quiet wonder. No celebration, no fanfare, just the deep stillness that follows when something sacred has taken place. The two faithful servants stood beside their master, not above one another, not as rivals, but as brothers, their hearts bound by the same gratitude, the same peace. Far away in the grove, the third servant stood motionless, the buried coin now in his hand, its cool weight a reminder of time lost. He could hear the faint murmur of voices carried on the wind, joy in every tone, and it both comforted and frightened him. The light that once seemed far off now drew near, inevitable as dawn. He looked at the coin again, dull from its years beneath the soil. Yet even dulled, it caught the last ray of sunset and glimmered faintly. He whispered, "This is what I still have," and began the slow walk toward the master's voice. The valley around him seemed to hold its breath. Even the wind quieted, waiting, the rustle of leaves soft as prayer. And though the road was long, each step felt lighter than the one before. For in the act of coming forward, something inside him had already begun to heal. At the crest of the hill he saw them, the master and the servants standing in the soft light, their faces turned toward him. The master's gaze full of the same kindness as before, unchanged by time or outcome. Just love, patient and steady. The third servant hesitated, shame rising like tidewater around his chest. Yet the master did not turn away. His eyes invited, not demanded. His stillness saying what words never could. Come home. Take a deep breath now. Let it fill you like light finding the corners of a dark room. Exhale slowly. Let regret drift away like dust carried by wind. Let forgiveness take its place, gentle and sure. The master waits not to judge, but to restore, not to demand, but to embrace. For what he entrusts to us is never about gain. It is about love returned, courage remembered, and grace renewed. The world seemed to grow still as the third servant reached the clearing. the master's eyes upon him. Not sharp, not cold, but steady, full of quiet knowing. The other servants stepped aside, making space for what was sacred and heavy to unfold. The wind hushed through the olive branches, carrying the scent of the earth, and the sky above turned that deep, forgiving blue that comes just before night fully arrives. The servant fell to his knees, his hands trembling as he held out the single coin, dull now from years beneath the soil, his voice a whisper tangled in shame. "Master, I knew you were a man of great expectation. I was afraid. I buried what you gave me. I kept it safe. Here. It is yours." The words broke like waves against the stillness. Fragile, small, honest. For a long moment, the master said nothing. He simply looked at the servant, his expression unreadable but kind. The silence itself felt holy, like a pause in which heaven was deciding whether to speak in thunder or in mercy. And when he finally spoke, his voice was soft, sorrowful, almost tender. "My child, I did not give you this gift to keep it safe. I gave it to let it live." The servant's breath caught, eyes lifting to meet his master's gaze. And what he saw there was not anger, but sadness. The kind of sadness that comes from love unreturned, potential unopened, joy withheld by fear. The master reached down, lifted the coin from his hands, and held it up between them, its dull surface catching the faintest trace of fading light. Even now, its worth has not changed, but what it could have become, what it could have shared, was lost to waiting. He let the words rest between them, not to wound, but to awaken, the truth shimmering like a mirror in the servant's heart. The servant bowed his head, tears falling freely now. He whispered, "I was afraid to lose it. I was afraid to disappoint you." The master knelt beside him, resting a hand on his shoulder. "And yet, in hiding it, you forgot how close I always was. You forgot that my joy is not in your success, but in your trust." The field around them glowed faintly in the last breath of sunset. The faithful servants watched in reverent silence, understanding that what was happening was not judgment, but mercy. The moment when truth meets fear and turns it into wisdom. The master stood, helping the servant to his feet. "Come. There is still light enough to begin again, and what has been buried can still bloom." He placed the coin in the servant's hand once more, not as a sentence, but as a promise, a new chance born in love. The parable shimmered like starlight against the gathering dark, showing that failure is not the end of faith, that even in sorrow, God writes renewal, that the master's joy is not earned, but offered, again and again, Take a slow breath. Let grace enter with it. Exhale softly. And let fear leave with the fading air. Let your heart rest in the warmth of forgiveness. Let your spirit unclench. And feel the nearness of mercy. No effort made in love is wasted. No return to trust is too late. The Master's arms are always open. His joy always waiting. His light always enough. The night deepened into a velvet calm. Stars spilled across the sky like scattered blessings. The land resting beneath their silent glow. The air carried a warmth that spoke of peace returning. Slow, gentle, unforced. The third servant stood in that tender light, the coin still resting in his palm, heavier now with meaning than with metal. His eyes lifted toward the Master, not in defense anymore, but in a fragile kind of wonder, the kind that comes when shame finally loosens its grip and gives way to truth. He whispered, his voice rough with emotion, "I was so certain you wanted perfection, that you measured me by success. I didn't know you only wanted my trust." The Master's gaze softened even more, the faint curve of a smile returning. Fear builds walls where love meant to plant gardens. He said quietly, "You guarded what was meant to grow. But see, even now, the soil of your heart is still alive. It can still receive. It can still bear fruit." The servant closed his fingers around the coin again, feeling its cool surface press into his skin. But this time it no longer symbolized failure. It was a seed, a beginning, a thing that could still be offered back to love. The faithful servants stood nearby, their faces bathed in the flickering light of lanterns. They did not speak. They simply watched, understanding that what they were witnessing was holy. Not a reckoning, but a restoration. The way mercy always bends down to meet those who are afraid to rise. The Master gestured toward the field, its harvest standing tall and ready. "Come and see," he said softly. And together they walked through the golden rows, the first and second servants walking slightly behind, the third moving hesitantly beside his Master, the sound of grain brushing against their legs like soft applause, the whisper of creation echoing what heaven had always known. Faithfulness is never wasted, even when it comes late. As they reached the center of the field, the Master stopped, his eyes reflecting starlight. "Do you see this?" he said. Each stalk began as something small, something buried, unseen, waiting in darkness for its moment to break through. The seed did not fail because it was hidden. It failed only when it refused to grow. The words sank deep into the servant's heart. Tears found him again. But this time they were clean, healing, each one a release of fear into faith. He knelt and pressed his hand to the soil, whispering, "I am ready to begin again." And in that moment, something unseen shifted. A peace he had not known in years filled his chest, light and warm as breath on a cool morning. The master placed his hand on the servant's head, a gesture older than time, blessing renewed in silence. And for the first time since the beginning of the story, the three stood together. No difference, no comparison, only belonging. Each one part of the same grace that had called them from the start. Take a slow breath now. Let the air move through you like forgiveness in motion. Exhale, releasing the heaviness of things left undone. Let the body soften, the heart quiet. Let the spirit remember that renewal often begins in the same soil where fear once grew. For the Master's joy is never lost. It waits for every returning heart. It shines through every late awakening. And it whispers even now, "You are still mine. You are still loved. You can still grow." The night held its breath, the stars steady and silver above the valley. The air brushed the land like a tender promise. All was quiet except for the soft rhythm of footsteps through the field. The master and his servants walking together beneath the vast mercy of the sky. The third servant's heart still trembled with wonder. Every step felt like an undeserved gift. The coin in his hand no longer a symbol of regret, but a reminder that grace does not keep score. That time lost in fear can still be redeemed when offered back in trust. His chest rose and fell in slow rhythm, breath returning to peace. The master stopped near the well at the edge of the field, water shimmering faintly in the lantern's glow. "Look at this," he said quietly. "The water never demands. It simply gives. It fills the vessel placed before it. But if the vessel is turned upside down, even a river cannot enter. Fear does that to the heart. It turns it away from what would fill it." The servant listened, each word sinking deeper than the one before. He knelt by the well and looked into its depths, the reflection of his face trembling in the water, not because of wind, but because tears touched the surface. The master continued softly, "I did not give the talents for gain. I gave them to teach trust, to let you feel the joy I feel when life multiplies in love. My kingdom is not measured by return, but by relationship, by the courage to care even when the outcome is unseen." The other two servants drew closer, their eyes gentle, their faces calm. They understood now that faithfulness is a circle, not a ladder, that the master's delight rests equally on the diligent and the returning, the fruitful and the forgiven. For each has chosen love over fear, and that is the true increase. The third servant looked at the coin again, its faint shimmer catching the light of the stars reflected in the well. It felt alive in his hand, not as currency, but as calling. He whispered, "Then let this belong to you again. Use it as you will, through my hands or through another's. I only want it to breathe again." The master smiled. The kind of smile that makes the air around it gentler. "And so it shall," he said. "For what is offered in sincerity never returns empty." Even the seed planted late in the season can still bear fruit if placed in good soil. They sat together for a while beside the well. No words. Just the night breathing softly around them. The sound of crickets rising and falling like the heartbeat of creation. Peace thick and tangible. As though heaven had settled close enough to touch. The first servant closed his eyes and murmured, "He is good. Always good." The second nodded, whispering, and patient beyond measure. The third, voice trembling but sure, added, "And merciful even to those who fear the light." And for a moment, it felt as though the stars themselves bowed in agreement. Take a slow, deep breath. Inhale calmness. Exhale the echo of fear. Let the body sink into rest. Let the heart rest in gratitude. Let peace find you like water finding its level. Steady. Quiet. Sure. The lesson of trust moves gently through the night, reminding that faith is not in the outcome, but in the offering. Not in perfection, but in presence. And even the smallest motion toward love becomes holy in his sight. The dawn unfolded in silence. Soft lights spilling over the horizon like forgiveness taking form. Dew glistened on the wheat and olive leaves. Every droplet catching the first breath of day. The world itself seemed to whisper, "Begin again." The master stood at the edge of the field, his eyes tracing the curve of the land he had entrusted to them. And for a long while he said nothing, just watched the wind move through the grain like an invisible hand painting peace across the valley. The servants stood nearby. 3 hearts, 3 stories, woven now into one rhythm of grace. The third servant held the coin gently between his palms. It no longer felt heavy, only alive. The metal warm from his touch, almost pulsing, as if faith had found its heartbeat again. He looked at the master, and saw no trace of disappointment, only invitation. The kind of love that asks for nothing, yet makes you want to give everything. He knelt and pressed the coin into the soil at his feet, not to hide it, but to plant it. A quiet act of surrender, of trust reborn. If it grows, let it grow for you, he whispered, and the words floated into the morning air like incense. Unseen, but fragrant with hope. The master's smile deepened, the kind of smile that blesses more than words. "You have understood the secret," he said softly, "that the kingdom is within, not in the measure of what you hold, but in the spirit of how you give." The other servants stepped closer. The first offered a small sheaf of grain. The second placed a flask of oil beside it. Simple gifts from their labor. And together, in the hush of morning, They built an altar from what they had grown. Nothing grand. Just a circle of stones. The sound of doves above them marking the holiness of the moment. The master bowed his head in silence, his lips forming a prayer older than language. And as he lifted his eyes again, the light around them seemed to change. Softer, fuller, as though heaven had drawn a little nearer. He spoke then, his voice low, like wind moving through cedar. You have been faithful in what was small, and now you have discovered that nothing given in love is ever small. Every act, every seed, every word of kindness is already part of eternity, already part of my heart. The servants felt those words settle deep inside, like roots reaching into unseen water, and something awakened within them. A realization that faithfulness was not a duty, but a way of being, a way of seeing the world through the eyes of the one who had trusted them first. The third servant felt tears again, but this time they were bright with peace. I thought the buried coin was the end, he said softly. But it was only the beginning. The master's hand rested on his shoulder. Yes, he said, for in my kingdom, even what dies in the ground can rise in glory. The morning light grew stronger, stretching gold fingers across the hills. Birds lifting into the sky as if carrying their prayers with them. And for the first time since the story began, all three servants felt the same stillness within. A stillness that did not ask for more. A stillness that knew it already had enough. Take a slow breath now. In through the nose. Calm and deep. Exhale softly, letting the heart expand with gratitude. Let the shoulders release their hidden weight. Let the soul breathe again, like earth after rain. Faithfulness, once feared as labor, now revealed as love. Small things becoming eternal when placed in divine hands. Each act a seed in the soil of forever. The day settled into a soft brightness, a calm that felt almost sacred, as if heaven itself leaned closer to watch what peace looks like when it finally takes root. The master and his servants lingered beneath the olive trees, shadows moving like gentle water over the earth. The air smelled of harvest and oil and warmth. The third servant sat quietly, his fingers tracing the soil where the coin was planted. A small mound now marked by a smooth stone. Not as a grave, but as a promise. Sunlight flickered across it like a heartbeat, and for the first time he felt no need to guard, no fear of loss, only a strange and steady joy, the kind that arrives when surrender replaces striving. The master spoke softly, his words blending with the wind. Every heart has its threshold. That place between fear and freedom. Once crossed, the soul learns to rest, to trust that love will guide the rest of the journey. The servants listened, the meaning sinking in like rain. They understood now that faithfulness wasn't about how much they had done, but how deeply they had trusted while doing it. The first servant looked across the field that shimmered with grain, each stalk bending under its fullness. It was never the harvest that changed me, he murmured. It was the waiting, the days that asked for patience, the work that taught me peace. The second nodded, and it was the stillness between the labor, the quiet hours when I felt unseen, yet somehow still held. The third servant smiled faintly, and for me, it was the moment I stopped running from the gift and started letting it breathe. The master listened with a warmth that shone through his silence, his eyes reflecting both pride and tenderness. "Then you have all understood," he said gently. "For the light I give is not to be hoarded, but shared. And every time you trust that light, the world becomes brighter." The olive leaves above them rustled softly, the sound like distant applause from heaven. Dappled sunlight spilled across their faces, and the shadows seemed to pulse with life, as though creation itself rejoiced in their understanding. A soft wind moved through the valley, carrying the scent of figs and grain. The master rose and looked toward the horizon, the faint line between earth and sky blurring in the warmth of day. "This is how the kingdom grows," he whispered, "not through grandeur, but through grace, through the quiet faith of hearts that believe in the goodness of what they've been given." He turned to them. "Every sunrise will ask for faith again. Every evening will offer rest. Do not measure by what you see, but by the peace you keep in your heart. That is the true return I seek." The servants bowed their heads, the moment etched into their souls. They knew this peace would follow them long after the day ended, a light they could carry into every future morning. Take a slow breath. Feel the air move gently through your chest. Exhale slowly, letting each worry fade with it. Let the body settle, the spirit steady, the heart soften. Let the quiet wisdom of this story rest inside you like light on water. For faithfulness is not an act. It is a rhythm. It is the breath of love moving through small things, transforming them into eternal beauty. The afternoon ripened into gold, shadows stretching long and thin across the earth. The warmth gentle now, like a hand resting upon the heart. The master and his servants sat together in easy silence, the kind of silence that does not need to speak to be understood. The air shimmered softly, bees drifting between wildflowers at the edge of the field, a breeze carrying the scent of grain and olive and distant sea. And in that stillness, the master spoke again, his voice slow, woven with the rhythm of creation itself. "Faithfulness," he said, "is not measured by how much you achieve, but by the love within every small act, the quiet kindness that no one sees, the patience that continues when applause has long faded." The first servant nodded. eyes soft with memory. There were days when I thought no one noticed. He murmured, but somehow the peace inside me grew anyway. The Master smiled, because heaven notices what the world overlooks. Every sigh, every silent prayer, every tired hand that keeps giving, even when the reward is unseen. The second servant looked toward the trees heavy with fruit. It feels strange, he said quietly, how something as simple as care can change the heart so completely. I came to serve, but found that the service itself became joy. The Master turned his gaze to him. That is how love multiplies. Not by counting, but by becoming. When you pour yourself out, you discover that you were never empty to begin with. The third servant listened, his heart resting in this truth. Then even what I feared, even the wasted time, can be part of the offering. The Master's eyes warmed. Yes, for in my grace, nothing is wasted. The soil of regret can still bring forth flowers, and even the shadow can teach the light how to shine more tenderly. A hush fell again, long and full, the kind of silence that feels alive, as though angels paused to listen. The field swayed gently, gold and green merging in waves, the sound like breath, the rhythm like prayer. And in that moment the servants understood something deep and wordless, that their faithfulness was not about silver or gain or duty. It was about presence, about being here, fully, lovingly, with open hands and an unguarded heart. The Master rose slowly, light surrounding him as though the day itself bowed in reverence. Remember this, he said softly. The measure of the heart is not in what it holds, but in what it releases. And the smallest act done in love becomes infinite in my sight. He touched each of their shoulders in turn, blessing them with the same warmth that had begun this journey, the same trust, the same quiet joy. And though no one spoke, each heart whispered back the same silent vow. Let me keep this faith. Let me live this peace. Take a slow deep breath. Let it fill your chest like golden light. Exhale. Let the air leave softly, carrying away the dust of worry. Let the body grow light, the heart quiet. Let this truth settle deep, that every small act of goodness is seen, remembered, and folded into eternity. The measure of the heart is love, not perfection, not success, just love, steady and real, love that keeps tending, love that keeps believing, love that never stops returning to the one who gave it life. The day exhaled into evening, the light dimming into a soft golden hush, the kind of stillness that feels alive, as though the air itself is listening. The Master walked slowly through the fields once more, the servants following behind. their footsteps soundless on the worn earth, every motion gentle, every breath unhurried. The field had become something sacred now, no longer just a place of labor, but a living parable. Each stalk of wheat, each glimmer of oil, each turned stone whispered a truth that words could not carry. That faithfulness, even in the smallest corner, is never lost, never forgotten, never unseen by the eyes of love. The first servant walked with his hands clasped loosely before him, the skin of his palms rough, the nails dark with soil. Yet there was peace in that wornness, a beauty that only work touched by prayer can hold. He looked at the master and said softly, "It was in the quiet moments, the ordinary days, that I felt closest to you." The master smiled, "Because I was there, in the small things, in the breath between your thoughts, in the rhythm of your labor, in the grace you didn't know you carried." The second servant brushed a hand along the bark of an olive tree. "Sometimes I doubted if the waiting mattered, if the slowness of growth was a sign of your silence." The master turned his eyes toward the horizon, where the last edge of light met the coming dark. Every seed must rest in the earth before it reaches the sky. Waiting is not silence, it is preparation. And the stillness you feel is where I am most near. And the third servant, quiet all this time, finally spoke. "Then even the years I wasted, the fear I held, they too were known to you." The master's expression softened. "Yes. Nothing in your story is lost to me. Even the delay has become part of your redemption. Even the shadow has become a frame for the light that now lives in you." The servant's eyes glistened. He looked down at his hands, once so certain, now open, empty, peaceful. Then, all along, you were not waiting for my success. You were waiting for my surrender. The master nodded once. "And now that you have surrendered, you have found me again." The night gathered around them, cool and tender, the first stars winking above the olive branches, crickets tuning the quiet into song. The servants stood still, their hearts resting in that holy silence, the peace so deep it felt eternal. The master's lantern cast a circle of light around them, small but warm, its glow touching each face in turn. "This is grace," he said softly. "Not earned, not bought, only given. Received by the heart that stops striving long enough to rest in my love." They closed their eyes, breathing in that peace, breathing out the weight of old fears. The field seemed to sigh with them, as though creation itself had been waiting for this stillness. Take a slow breath. Let it move through you like calm water. Exhale gently. Let every thought drift to quiet. Feel the nearness of the divine in this hush. Feel the weight of grace resting lightly upon your chest. Even in stillness, the Master works. Even in rest, the soul grows. For peace itself is worship, and the heart that surrenders is the truest seed of faith. Night deepened like a slow breath, the stars bright and clear above the valley, their light falling over the land like scattered blessings. The Master and his servants sat together beneath the olive trees. No sound but the gentle pulse of wind and the soft hum of distant crickets. A silence so full it felt like prayer itself. The first servant leaned against the trunk beside him, eyes half closed, his heart heavy only with peace. I used to believe faithfulness was hard work, he murmured softly. Something to endure, something to earn. But now I see it was always rest disguised as duty. You were teaching me to love the task, not for reward, but because you were in it. The Master's eyes gleamed in the starlight. Faithfulness is love in motion, he said. It is the way heaven touches earth through your ordinary days. It is how my heart beats through your hands. Every time you stay kind, every time you stay true, you are already with me. The second servant smiled faintly, turning the small flask of oil in his hands. The flame from their lantern reflected in it like liquid fire. And when I was tired and felt unseen, that was when your peace felt closest, as though my silence made more room for your voice. The Master nodded. You learned the quiet song of service, the melody few can hear, but all creation knows. The third servant listened, his hands resting open on his knees, the earth cool beneath his palms. And I learned that failure does not end the story, that fear is not the final word, that your joy still finds those who hesitate. The Master's gaze lingered on him, tender as moonlight. Because my joy is not earned, it is shared. And once you have known its warmth, it stays with you, even in the dark. They sat there, the four of them, surrounded by night that shimmered with peace. No striving, no regret, only gratitude, the kind that hums quietly inside the ribs when the soul remembers it is safe. Above them the stars moved slowly, patient, eternal, the same lights that had watched Abraham count his promise, that had guided shepherds to a cradle. Now watching this small circle of faith renewed, the Master leaned back and looked up. The heavens declare my faithfulness, yet I have written the same constellations in you. You are the light I leave in the world, steady, gentle, unwavering. The servants said nothing, but tears shimmered on their faces, tears not of sorrow, but of release, of understanding, of peace that asked for nothing more. The lantern beside them flickered, its light mingling with the stars, as if earth and heaven shared the same heartbeat. And in that rhythm every wound seemed mended, every question answered by silence. Take a slow breath now. Let the air move deep into your chest. Exhale slowly, and feel the body loosen. Let peace find its home in you. Let stillness wrap around you like a cloak of light. For the faithful are never forgotten. Their quiet trust becomes the song that fills eternity. And even the smallest act done in love is written forever in the heart of God. The night had grown deep, yet it did not feel dark. The stars seemed closer now, their light gentler, as if heaven had leaned nearer to listen. The olive trees whispered softly, leaves shimmering with each tender breath of wind, and the master's lantern glowed like a small sun in their midst. Steady, unwavering, alive. The first servant sat with his head bowed, feeling the cool earth beneath his fingers, his voice barely above a breath. I see now that what I have done was never mine alone. Every seed, every harvest, was your breath moving through my hands. The master smiled faintly. And still you tended it. Still you cared. Still you believed. That is what makes the gift complete. Faithfulness is not doing it alone. It is doing it with me. The second servant added softly, and every drop of oil, every hour spent waiting for fruit to ripen, it all became worship, not through perfection, but through patience. The master turned to him. Patience is faith breathing quietly. It is the way trust proves itself true without words. Then the third servant lifted his gaze, the light of the lantern soft upon his face. His eyes filled not with sorrow now, but wonder. And even what I hid, what I buried, you have turned into something good. I was the one who failed, and yet you made my failure fertile. The master reached out his hand, resting it gently over the servant's heart. I turn nothing away. He whispered, even the smallest sorrow can become a seed when given to me. For I am the keeper of little things, the gatherer of what others forget, the one who makes even ashes bloom. The valley around them seemed to hum with that truth, a soft resonance that felt alive beneath the skin. The sound of water flowing unseen, the rustle of leaves, the murmur of crickets, all joined in a single, wordless hymn. The servants closed their eyes, feeling the world breathe with them, realizing that the master's presence was not only beside them, but within. That his joy did not wait at the end of the journey. It had walked with them all along. Time slowed, stretching into eternity's rhythm. The master's voice broke the silence once more, a whisper carried by the wind. Remember this night. Remember that I see every hidden act, every quiet kindness, every burden carried in love. Nothing escapes my gaze. Nothing is too small for my care. A tear slipped down the third servant's cheek, and when it touched the soil, It caught the lantern's light, sparkling like dew on the threshold of dawn. He whispered, "Then all is redeemed, even me." The master nodded, "Especially you, for the soil of humility grows the finest fruit. Take a slow breath, in through the nose, soft and deep, out through the mouth, long and easy. Let the heart settle, let the body rest. Let this truth cover you like evening light on still water. For God is the keeper of little things, the quiet watcher of faithful hearts, the one who gathers the smallest gestures and calls them holy. And in his keeping, nothing is ever lost." The night stretched toward its deepest hour, the kind where sound softens and even the wind seems to move with reverence. The lantern's flame burned lower now, smaller, but no less bright, its glow swaying gently across faces at peace. The field slept beneath a blanket of silver light, the harvest waiting, silent and complete. The master sat upon a smooth stone, eyes lifted toward the heavens, his servants beside him. No words were needed. Everything that mattered had already been spoken. Now was the time for stillness, for gratitude, for the quiet joy that lingers when the soul understands what it was made for. The first servant's voice came softly, a thread of sound barely breaking the hush. "All I gave was small, yet you made it bloom beyond what I imagined. Every day you turned my effort into song." The master smiled, "Because you worked with love, and love transforms all it touches. It is the music of my kingdom." The second servant looked toward the grove where the olive trees shimmered faintly under starlight. "The oil will run for many days," he said. "But even when it runs dry, I will still have peace. For I know now the joy was never in the harvest, but in your nearness while I waited." The master turned to him. "And that is the deepest reward, to know that I was with you all along, in every waiting, in every breath." The third servant closed his eyes, tears glinting in the lantern's light. "I feared that my story would end in regret, but now I see it ends in mercy, and begins again in peace." The master reached out his hand, placing it over the servant's heart. "Mercy rewrites every ending," he said softly, "and peace is the ink with which I write anew." Silence fell again, but it was a full silence, pulsing with life, the kind that hums beneath creation's heartbeat. The night itself seemed to bow, and the field glowed faintly under the gaze of its maker. Every seed, every blade, every grain a testament to unseen faithfulness. The master rose and looked across the valley, the horizon faintly brightening with the first hint of dawn, the stars beginning to dim as the world prepared for light once more. "This is how faith ends and begins," he whispered. "In rest, in gratitude, in peace that does not fade when the day arrives. The servants followed his gaze, hearts steady, their souls wrapped in stillness. They no longer felt the weight of what was done or undone, only the warmth of presence, the knowing that all had been seen, all had been received, all had become part of something eternal. Take a deep breath. Let the cool air move through you like morning wind over water. Exhale, and let everything heavy sink into the quiet earth. Feel the heart slow, the mind empty, the spirit open like a field ready for light. The faithful rest in the joy of their master, not as servants, but as children, not as workers, but as beloved souls whose every small act has become part of forever. Dawn arrived softly, not as a sudden blaze, but as a gentle unfolding, the dark sky slowly giving way to pale gold and rose, mist rising from the valley like breath from the earth itself. The fields shimmered in that new light, the world washed clean and quiet. The master and his servants stood together at the edge of the morning, bathed in peace that words could not hold. The first rays of sun touched the soil, and the place where the coin had been planted glowed faintly, a small shoot breaking through the ground, tender and green, bending toward the light. The third servant knelt beside it, wonder filling his chest. The master's hand rested on his shoulder. "You see," he whispered, "nothing entrusted in faith ever stays buried forever. Everything given in love will rise again." The first servant smiled through quiet tears. "Then this is how heaven speaks, not in thunder, but in new beginnings." The second added softly, "And the smallest seed, the faintest yes, becomes life when it rests in your hands." The master looked at them both, and then at the one who had feared. And even fear can become faith, when it finally lets go. The valley shimmered with awakening, the breeze moving through the wheat, the sound of doves taking flight. The day felt like a hymn, every motion an act of worship, every light a reflection of love returned. The servants turned to the master, their faces open, their hearts unguarded. "What would you have us do now?" The first asked softly. "Now that the harvest is done, now that peace has come." The master smiled. "Go and live what you have learned. Tend the world as you have tended this field. Carry my joy wherever you go. For every kindness is a seed, every gentle word a talent multiplied, every act of faithfulness a mirror of my heart." They bowed their heads, not in duty, but in devotion. And when they looked again, the master's form seemed woven into the light, still present, yet everywhere at once, like warmth that remains long after the fire fades. The field stood quiet, yet alive, the tiny sprout near the fig tree lifting toward the rising sun. the promise of redemption made visible, the story complete, yet still beginning. For faithfulness does not end. It continues in every soul that dares to trust again. The first servant turned to the others. Their faces radiant in the morning glow. No words passed between them, but the silence said everything. They understood that the work would go on, not in toil, but in peace, in the rhythm of love that never stops giving. Take a slow breath. Let it move through you like the light of morning. Exhale softly. Let rest become renewal. Let gratitude fill the space where striving once lived. Let peace settle deep in the body, as sure as dawn upon the hills. The story ends where it always begins. In love. In trust. In the gentle knowing that God treasures the faithful in small things. And through them, the world is quietly made whole. Now rest. In this stillness. In this grace. For you too are seen. You too are loved. And the light of the Master still walks beside you. Sleep now. In peace. In the presence of the one who never forgets the small things.